It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in small-town Ohio, the kind of day that felt deceptively safe. Birds chirped lazily in the maple trees, and the sun cast long, golden streaks across the Miller family's backyard. 3-year-old Emma was supposed to be playing in her sandbox, digging furiously with her tiny pink shovel, a grin smeared with dirt. Her mother, Laura, was inside, folding laundry and humming along to the faint music from the kitchen radio. Her father, Tom, had stepped out to grab the mail, the screen door clicking shut behind him. But when Laura peeked through the kitchen window a few minutes later, Emma was gone. The sandbox lay empty, her little handprints etched into the damp sand, her tiny boots abandoned nearby. A chill ran down Laura's spine. "Emma," she called, her voice shaking, louder this time, reaching a pitch that made her own ears hurt. Silence. Tom appeared from the front porch, alarm etched across his face. "She was just here," he said, eyes darting around the yard. Their hearts began to hammer in unison, an instinctive dread settling in their stomachs. They ran to the street, scanning their quiet cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked from windows, some stepping out to offer help, but no one had seen anything unusual, no stranger lurking, no suspicious vehicle. Just the still, heavy quiet of early afternoon. By the time the local police arrived, the neighborhood had transformed into a scene from a nightmare. Patrol cars lined the street, their lights flashing red and blue in the soft sunlight. Officers spoke in clipped, urgent tones into radios, coordinating search parties. Every nearby wooded area, every alley, every hidden corner of the block was checked. Detective Marcus Riley, a man with 20 years on the force, took in the scene like a hawk. His chest tightened at the sight of Emma's abandoned swing, swaying gently in the breeze. Something about that swing, empty and motionless, struck him with a visceral sense of wrongness. Riley knelt beside the sandbox, running his gloved hand over the imprints Emma had left. They were small, delicate, but deliberate, almost as if she had paused mid-play. And then he noticed them, tiny footprints leading toward the woods that bordered the Millers' backyard. The grass had been flattened slightly, disturbed, forming a trail that twisted and turned into the shadowy tree line. He motioned to the K-9 unit. Rex, a German shepherd with a glossy black coat and eyes that seemed almost human in their intelligence, padded over. The dog's ears pricked up as Riley knelt to attach the tracking harness. Rex sniffed the air, nostrils flaring, then crouched low, his tail stiff. With a single bark, he darted toward the trail. Riley followed, heart thudding. The woods were dense, the afternoon light filtering through thick foliage, casting long, eerie shadows across the forest floor. Birds scattered with shrill cries as they sensed the intrusion. The trail twisted deeper, leading to a narrow clearing where a faint, unsettling silence replaced the usual ambient noises of nature. Rex froze. His hackles rose, teeth bared slightly, and he let out a low, warning growl. Riley's stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. He scanned the clearing, eyes sweeping from shadows to shadows. A faint whimper reached him, barely audible, and he froze, heart hammering. It was coming from just beyond the trees, somewhere Rex refused to go. "Emma," Riley called, his voice cracking despite his attempts to stay calm. No answer, just the rustle of leaves in a light wind. Minutes passed, each stretching longer than the last. The officers behind him whispered, voices tight with tension, but Riley didn't hear them. His focus was on Rex, who sat rigid, nose twitching toward the darkest part of the clearing. Riley felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Something was hiding there, something that was not supposed to be in these woods. And then, unexpectedly, a small figure stumbled into view at the far edge of the road, tiny, barefoot, clutching a stuffed bunny so tightly it was nearly crushed in her hands. Emma. She looked up, wide-eyed and pale, her hair damp and tangled. Relief hit Laura like a physical blow as she ran to scoop her daughter into her arms, tears streaming freely. Tom followed, shouting her name, but the joy was overshadowed by unease. Emma was unharmed physically, but her eyes told a story no parent wanted to read. Fear, confusion, and a shadow of trauma flickered behind her gaze. The officers breathed a collective sigh of relief, but Detective Riley remained uneasy. Something about the way Emma held her bunny, how she kept glancing at Rex, set off alarm bells in his mind. He crouched down to her level. "Hey, Emma," he said gently, "can you tell me what happened?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. She just pointed at Rex. It was a simple gesture, but Riley felt it pierce him like a lightning bolt. The dog tilted his head, sensing the connection. In that moment, Riley realized this wasn't just a case of a wandering child. There was something more, something hidden in the spaces between words, in the instincts of a child and a dog who seemed to understand more than anyone expected. The paramedics checked her over while Laura held her tightly, whispering reassurances. But Emma wouldn't let go of Rex's leash. Her tiny fingers wrapped around it, knuckles white. She refused to answer any questions. Every time Riley tried to coax her, she shook her head, glancing nervously toward the woods as though expecting someone or something to emerge from the shadows. That night the Miller house was quiet but tense. Laura and Tom sat in the living room, holding Emma close, but sleep eluded them. Riley reviewed the initial reports in his office, a cold coffee cooling beside him. The footprints, the trail to the woods, Rex's behavior, every piece of evidence told him this wasn't a random disappearance. Someone had been watching, waiting, and possibly following. And then he remembered the whimper in the clearing, not Emma's. Something else had been there, something that had made Rex freeze. Riley shivered. Whatever it was, it hadn't moved on. It had watched, and that realization made the blood run cold in his veins. Emma slept fitfully that night, her thumb in her mouth, Bunny pressed to her chest, Rex curled protectively at her feet. The adults stayed awake, staring at the shadows, aware that the danger was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, the threads of this mystery were tightening. And the next morning, when Emma spoke for the first time, everything was about to change. Suspense hook for part 2. When Emma finally whispered a single sentence to Riley and Rex, it would shatter the case wide open, but no adult was prepared for the truth a 3-year-old could reveal. The morning sun spilled through the curtains of the Miller home, casting soft streaks of light across the living room. Emma lay curled up on the couch, her small frame wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide and dark as she clutched her favorite stuffed bunny. Rex, the black German shepherd, lay at her feet, ears twitching at every sound. The house was quiet, but every creak of the floorboards or distant car horn made Emma flinch. Detective Riley stepped inside, careful not to startle her. His face was calm, professional, but the tight line of his jaw betrayed the weight of the case. He carried a small notebook, a pen poised, but he knew that words alone wouldn't reach a 3-year-old who had seen things no child should see. He crouched slowly, lowering himself to her level. "Emma," he said gently, "do you remember yesterday? Can you tell me what happened?" The child shook her head, eyes darting toward Rex, who nudged her knee with his snout as if to reassure her. Riley noticed a tremor in her small hands. She wasn't just scared of what happened. She was terrified of being believed, of the wrong people finding out what she knew. Laura, sitting nearby, whispered, She won't talk yet, not to anyone." Her voice cracked. "She keeps looking at Rex like he knows something she can't explain." Riley's heart sank. This wasn't unusual. Children who had gone through trauma often relied on objects, or in this case, a dog, for safety. But there was something more here, something he couldn't quite name. He leaned closer. "Rex," he said softly, "can you help us?" The dog's ears pricked and he stepped closer to Emma, resting his head on her lap. She allowed a small hand to pat his head, but her eyes never left the shadows of the living room. Riley waited, letting the silence stretch. He knew that sometimes in trauma, words didn't come easily, but instincts did. Hours passed, with small, careful attempts from a child psychologist to coax Emma into talking. Dr. Marlene Hayes was a veteran of working with traumatized children, her voice soothing, her approach patient. "Emma," she said softly, "you're safe here. You can tell me what happened and no one will get mad." The child's lips quivered, and her small finger trembled as it pointed toward Rex. Then she whispered, barely audible, a sentence that made Riley's pen hover midair. "He followed me," Rex knows. Riley's chest tightened. He blinked. Did he just hear that correctly? Emma, a 3-year-old, was implying that Rex, the police dog, had some understanding, some awareness that went beyond instinct. Dr. Hayes leaned in. "Emma, can you tell us what Rex knows?" Emma swallowed hard, her gaze darting toward the woods visible from the living room window. He smells him. He watches." Her words were broken, halting, but the message was clear. The dog had somehow tracked the presence of the person who had taken her, the same person she had been too scared to describe in detail. Riley felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Police dogs are trained to detect human scents, to follow trails, to alert to danger. But this was different. Emma's tiny mind had connected dots that adults had yet to see. And Rex, somehow, had reacted in ways that confirmed her story, growling at shadows, freezing mid-trail, staring at invisible threats that no human had noticed. Laura's voice broke through the tense silence. "What does she mean? Who?" Her eyes were red from crying, desperation twisting every word. Emma's small voice shook, but she pointed toward the tree line behind the Miller house. He hid. He waited. Rex knows he's bad." The room fell silent. Riley's mind raced, piecing together what little evidence they had. The footprints in the backyard, the disturbed trail into the woods, the shadowy figures seen by neighbors, nothing made complete sense. Until now. Riley took a deep breath and decided to test the connection. He knelt next to Rex, leash in hand. "Rex, show me." The dog stood instantly, stiff and alert. He moved toward the living room window, growling low, then bolted to the door leading to the backyard. Riley followed cautiously, heart hammering. Rex sniffed at the ground, ears twitching, tail rigid. Then he stopped abruptly, pawing at the fence that separated the Miller yard from the neighboring woods. He barked sharply, the same bark he had made the day Emma disappeared. Laura gasped. He's pointing." "Yes," Riley said quietly, eyes narrowing. "And I think Emma just told us exactly where we need to look." Dr. Hayes leaned down to Emma's level. "Emma, can you tell us what he did? What happened?" The toddler shook her head. "No, he'll get mad. He's scary." Her lips trembled. "But Rex is brave. Rex will show." Riley exchanged a look with Dr. Hayes. This wasn't just a child's imagination. The combination of Emma's recollection and Rex's trained instincts was forming a lead that the entire police force had missed. That afternoon, the investigation team reconvened. Maps were spread across the table, officers and detectives speaking in clipped tones, tracking the trail from the Miller backyard through the woods and into the surrounding streets. Surveillance footage from nearby homes was scoured, though nothing concrete appeared. And yet, Rex remained fixated, barking and growling at points on the map that aligned with Emma's gestures and whispers. Riley felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The child was giving him the location of a criminal nobody had yet identified. And the thought of what could happen if the suspect realized a 3-year-old had spoken out made him uneasy. The danger wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Late that evening, as the family tried to settle Emma down for bed, she finally spoke more clearly, the first real sentence she had managed in hours. "He came from the house with the broken porch light. He took me. I hid. Rex knew." Riley's jaw tightened. A mental image of the criminal flashed in his mind, lurking near the Miller home, waiting, preying on a tiny child. He could almost see the man's shadow crossing the yard, hear the soft scrape of shoes against gravel. Emma's words were sparse, hesitant, but they painted a horrifying picture. Laura wept quietly in the corner, holding Emma tightly. Tom sat in stunned silence, gripping his daughter's small hand, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. Their child had survived, but the horror of the event was not over. Someone had deliberately targeted their family, and Emma's innocent testimony had pointed them toward a predator they didn't yet fully understand. Riley sat back, rubbing his eyes. He glanced at Rex, who lay alert beside Emma, ears twitching, eyes sharp. The dog had done more than follow a scent. He had formed a bond with Emma that transcended training. He understood her fear, her instinct, and perhaps even the danger they were facing. And then the thought hit him, the court. If Emma's words could be used in court, they could destroy the suspect's alibi, unravel a web of lies, and ensure justice. But could the world handle the testimony of a 3-year-old? Could the adults who doubted her see the truth that was so plainly visible to her and to Rex? Riley leaned forward, making a silent promise to himself. He would protect Emma. He would make sure she was heard. And he would follow Rex wherever the dog's instincts led him, no matter how terrifying it might be. Because tomorrow, when the police brought the evidence to court and Emma told her story, the entire case, and perhaps the town itself, would be changed forever. Suspense hook for Part 3. Emma's first words in court would stun everyone, the defense, the jury, and even the veteran detectives. And Rex's actions would leave no room for doubt that the truth was far stranger and far more dangerous than anyone imagined. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, fear, and anticipation. The late morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting stripes of light across the worn benches where townspeople, reporters, and curious onlookers had gathered. Cameras clicked, capturing every moment, every expression, every whispered conversation. The air was thick with a tension that made it hard to breathe. Emma sat quietly on her mother's lap, her small fingers intertwined with Rex's leash. The black German shepherd lay at her feet, ears pricked, tail still, as though sensing the gravity of the moment. Laura's hands shook slightly as she held her daughter close, whispering reassurances, but her own heart raced. Tom stood behind them, jaw tight, eyes scanning the courtroom nervously. Detective Riley took his place at the back of the room, notebook in hand. He had spent the last week piecing together every detail Emma had shared, tracing footprints, examining surveillance footage, and coordinating with the K-9 unit. But no amount of evidence could have prepared him, or anyone, for what was about to happen. The prosecution called Emma to the stand first. The defense attorney's brow furrowed, incredulous. "Your Honor," he whispered, "this is a 3-year-old child. She cannot possibly testify to anything of value." The judge, a stern woman with decades on the bench, glanced down at Emma, then back at the attorney. "We will see what she has to say," she replied, her voice firm. "Proceed." Emma clutched Rex's leash tightly as she stepped onto the witness stand. The courtroom fell silent, every eye trained on the tiny girl who had become the center of the town's collective attention. Her voice was barely a whisper at first. He hid me under the porch," she said, her eyes wide, scanning the room as if the culprit could appear at any moment. "I was scared. I called for Mom, but he covered my mouth. Rex knew." Riley's stomach twisted. The entire courtroom froze. Not just because a 3-year-old was recounting a terrifying incident, but because her words were precise, vivid, and unmistakably true. The defense attorney opened his mouth to object, but the judge held up a hand. Emma had their attention, and the world outside the courtroom seemed to vanish. Rex, obedient yet instinct-driven, barked once, low, controlled, a warning. The dog's body tensed as if reacting to a presence no human could perceive. Every adult in the room felt it. A silent message carried in the growl, a sense of imminent danger that extended beyond the child and into the shadows of the courtroom. Emma pointed with her free hand toward the defendant, a local handyman named Gregory Hayes, who had long been under suspicion for minor offenses, trespassing, petty theft, and unsettling behavior around children. He sat rigid in his chair, attempting to mask the sudden pallor spreading across his face. His lips trembled, but no sound came out. Riley leaned forward slightly, observing the subtle cues, the way Gregory shifted in his seat, the way his hands fidgeted, and most disturbingly, the way his gaze flickered nervously toward the witness stand and the dog. Something in the room had changed. The dynamic had shifted, and it was palpable. Emma's small voice continued. I hid under the porch. He went away. I waited. Rex, he helped me. He sniffed him and barked, he knows. The courtroom erupted into whispers. The prosecution exchanged a glance with Riley, both understanding the gravity of what was happening. The child was not only recounting her abduction, she was describing a connection between her abductor and the police dog that no one had ever documented before. Dr. Hayes, the child psychologist, approached slowly. She knelt to be at eye level with Emma. Emma, can you tell us what happened next? Emma's lips quivered. He tried to hide the bunny. I ran. Rex, he chased. He barked. He growled. He scared him. The defense attorney pounded his fist lightly on the table. Objection. This is inadmissible. A toddler cannot testify about a dog's behavior as evidence. But the judge shook her head. Overruled. The testimony of a minor is allowed. Additionally, the dog's behavior is a relevant factor in corroborating her account. Proceed. Riley felt a shiver of vindication. The K-9 unit had trained Rex for scenarios exactly like this, but pairing his instincts with Emma's testimony was unprecedented. The combination was a force that could not be ignored. Gregory's knuckles turned white on the edges of the defense table. He whispered something to his attorney, words lost in the tension of the courtroom, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Every person in the room could see it. The child had somehow identified him, and the dog had reinforced her claim. Emma, gaining confidence, added, He was hiding. Rex, he smelled him, he barked, he knows. The prosecutor leaned forward. Detective Riley, would you like to demonstrate? Riley hesitated briefly, then nodded. He gave Rex a signal and the dog sprang to life. He padded to the edge of the stand, sniffed around the floor near Gregory's chair and barked sharply, the sound cutting through the tense murmurs of the courtroom. Rex circled the man, growling softly but steadily, ears pricked, eyes locked on his target. A collective gasp filled the room. The jurors leaned forward, reporters snapped photos, and Gregory's face drained of color. The child had spoken. The dog had confirmed. The evidence was undeniable. Emma's parents held their breaths. Laura whispered, You're so brave, baby. Tom nodded, tears streaking his cheeks, unable to speak. The room was a maelstrom of shock, fear, and disbelief. Riley turned back to the prosecution. Your Honor, this is more than a child's account. Rex's behavior corroborates her story. This is a direct link to the suspect. The judge nodded slowly. Noted. Let the record reflect that the child's testimony, supported by the dog's actions, has been observed. Gregory's lawyer fumbled, words coming out in staccato bursts. This is ridiculous. A dog, a child. This is circumstantial. You can't convict a man based on instinct. But the prosecution pressed forward. The child described specific actions and locations that only the abductor could know. The dog, trained in scent and tracking, reacted to these stimuli in ways consistent with the child's account. The evidence aligns, Your Honor. It is far from circumstantial. Emma, still gripping Rex's leash, whispered something that made the entire courtroom freeze. He's lying, he's scary, Rex knows. Riley's stomach turned. The weight of her words, simple yet devastatingly precise, hung in the air like a storm cloud. Every adult in the room felt it. The truth had arrived in the voice of a 3-year-old and the instincts of a German shepherd. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. The jurors exchanged uneasy glances. The reporters scribbled frantically, cameras capturing every flicker of emotion. And Gregory sat frozen, unable to defend himself against the smallest, yet most damning witnesses imaginable. Then came the twist no one anticipated. A subtle flicker of recognition crossed Emma's face. She pointed toward a corner of the courtroom at a shadow near the back. He's watching. He's here. The room froze. Every eye turned toward the corner she indicated. Riley's hand went to his radio, a cold realization settling in. The danger was not contained. The abduction was part of something bigger. Someone had been following the case, watching Emma, Rex, and the courtroom. Rex growled low, a warning that no one could ignore. Emma's voice, small but unwavering, echoed again. Rex knows, he can't hide. The judge called for order, but the suspense had already gripped every person in the room. The courtroom was no longer just a place for testimony. It had become a stage for a revelation that would shake the town, reveal secrets, and put everyone on edge. Suspense hook for Part 4. The child's words combined with the dog's instincts had exposed the suspect, but the real danger lurked just beyond the courtroom doors, waiting to strike when no one expected it. The courtroom had never felt smaller. Every eye was fixed on the tiny girl who had become the epicenter of the town's attention. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, reporters leaned forward, and the murmurs of spectators filled the high, arched space. The tension was suffocating, almost physical, pressing down on everyone present. Emma sat rigid on the witness stand, her small fingers entwined with Rex's leash. The black German shepherd rested at her feet, alert and tense, a living shadow beside her. Laura and Tom hovered behind, their faces etched with worry, but they trusted Riley. Their daughter was in the best hands. Riley, stationed near the edge of the courtroom, scanned the room with sharp eyes. Something about the air made him uneasy. This wasn't just about testimony anymore. Something bigger was in motion. The prosecution leaned forward, smoothing out papers that detailed the timeline of the abduction. "Emma," the attorney said, voice gentle yet firm, "can you tell us what happened when he took you?" Emma's lips trembled, but her eyes, wide and intense, were fixed on the defendant, Gregory Hayes. He took me. He hid me under the porch. He covered my mouth. I was scared. Rex helped me. He barked. He knew." A collective gasp echoed across the room. Jurors leaned forward, reporters scribbled furiously, and Gregory's face turned a shade paler than the courthouse walls. He opened his mouth, trying to form words, but no sound came out. His lawyer's hand gripped his shoulder, shaking slightly, while the man himself stared at Emma, frozen. Riley felt a shiver of anticipation and dread. Emma's words were chilling in their simplicity, a child recounting trauma with terrifying clarity. But what made it undeniable was Rex. The dog had barked sharply when Emma mentioned the hiding spot, paced the witness stand when she spoke, and now stood alert, hackles subtly raised, eyes locked on the man accused. The judge, a woman known for her calm demeanor, adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "Let the record reflect the child's testimony and the dog's reactions," she said quietly, almost reverently. "We will continue." Emma's small voice continued, quivering but unwavering. He tried to hide my bunny. I ran. Rex, he chased. He barked. He growled. He scared him." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Every adult present understood instinctively that this was not a typical case. Emma's account was precise, detailed, and corroborated by the dog's trained behavior. The combination was unprecedented, unassailable, and terrifying for the defendant. The defense attorney leapt to his feet, voice sharp and incredulous. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A 3-year-old child and a dog cannot provide credible testimony. This is inadmissible." But the judge shook her head slowly. "Overruled. The court recognizes that the child's testimony, corroborated by the dog's behavior, is relevant and admissible. Proceed." Gregory's face contorted with anger and fear. He whispered something frantically to his attorney, who shook her head, attempting to calm him. But it was clear. For the first time, the man who had terrorized a 3-year-old was confronted with irrefutable evidence: a child's words and a dog's instincts. Riley watched closely as Emma described the sequence of events: the abduction, the hiding, the moments of terror, and finally the escape. Each sentence was punctuated by subtle cues from Rex: a bark, a growl, a pawed motion that confirmed the child's narrative. The jurors were visibly affected, leaning forward, whispering among themselves, eyes wide with disbelief. Then came the moment that would shock everyone. Emma pointed directly at Gregory and said clearly, He's the one, he did it. Rex knows he's lying. The courtroom went silent. Even the murmurs of reporters died down. Every adult held their breath. Gregory's face drained of color, his lips trembling. He looked around as if searching for an escape, but there was none. His actions had been watched, documented, and now testified to by a 3-year-old and a German shepherd. Riley's hand instinctively went to Rex's leash. "Show them, boy," he whispered. Rex sprang into action, circling the defendant, sniffing the air, growling softly but steadily, ears alert, tail rigid. The dog's movements were precise, almost methodical, as if he were confirming every word Emma had spoken. The juror's eyes widened and the judge leaned forward, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. The defense attorney stammered, This is preposterous. A dog's behavior is not proof. You can't convict a man based on instinct and a child's imagination." But the prosecutor pressed forward, voice steady. The child described specific actions and locations that only the abductor could know. The dog's behavior corroborates her testimony. We have a witness who survived the abduction, and her account is reinforced by evidence. Emma's small voice rang out again, unwavering. "He's lying, Rex knows. He tried to hide the bunny, he's bad." The courtroom gasped again. The air was electric with tension, every person present feeling the gravity of what was unfolding. Emma's bravery, Rex's instincts, and the mounting evidence created a force impossible to ignore. And then came the twist no one anticipated. Emma's gaze shifted slightly, her finger pointing toward a shadow near the back of the courtroom. He's watching. He's here." All heads turned. The room froze. Riley's pulse quickened. Someone was in the courtroom who shouldn't be, someone connected to the abduction, someone who had been following the case, someone dangerous. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was real, immediate, and terrifying. Rex growled low, a sound that reverberated through the wooden benches. Emma's eyes met Riley's, small but determined, as if saying, "We're not done. He can't hide." The judge called for order, banging her gavel, but the murmurs and whispers persisted. Every person in the courtroom sensed it. The drama unfolding was bigger than a trial. The abduction was part of a deeper, more dangerous web. Riley's mind raced. He thought of the footprints in the woods, the shadowy figures neighbors had mentioned, the trail Emma had described, and the instincts Rex had displayed. This wasn't just about one man. This was bigger, much bigger. Gregory slumped in his seat, defeated, eyes darting nervously around the courtroom, now aware that his secrets were unraveling. Every move, every action, every lie had been catalogued by the combination of child and dog, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. The jurors leaned forward, captivated by the scene before them. The prosecutors exchanged a glance with Riley. They knew that the combination of Emma's testimony and Rex's behavior had shifted the case irreversibly. This was no longer speculation. It was evidence in motion. Outside the courtroom, the townspeople waited in silence, anxious for updates. The story had spread faster than anyone expected. A 3-year-old girl, a police dog, and a criminal finally confronted with the consequences of his actions. Social media buzzed, neighbors whispered, and the town collectively held its breath. Back inside, Riley stayed vigilant. The threat Emma had indicated, the unseen presence watching from the shadows, could strike at any moment. The abduction, the trial, and the courtroom were just one layer of a story that was far from over. He tightened his grip on Rex's leash, silently promising no harm would come to Emma on his watch. Emma, small but fearless, looked up at Riley, her eyes steady. "Rex, he knows," she whispered. And in that moment everyone understood. Justice was within reach, but the fight was only beginning. Suspense hook for Part 5. Just when it seemed the abductor had been exposed, new evidence would surface, revealing that the danger was far from over and that Emma and Rex had only just scratched the surface of a terrifying truth. The courtroom had cleared, but the tension didn't dissipate. Outside, reporters swarmed the building like bees around a hive, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward. The story of a 3-year-old girl, a German shepherd, and a criminal finally exposed had ignited the town, spreading through social media faster than anyone could have anticipated. But Detective Riley knew the real story was far from over. As the crowd dispersed, Riley stayed behind, reviewing the notes from Emma's testimony and Rex's behavior. Something gnawed at him, a tiny detail that didn't fit the neat narrative they had just witnessed. Emma had described movements, hiding spots, and actions that only made sense if someone had been orchestrating the abduction beyond Gregory Hayes. The pieces weren't adding up. Riley's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. An anonymous tip had come in, a voice distorted and hurried. "He's not alone. His friends are planning something. Watch the witnesses. She's next." Riley's blood ran cold. The threat wasn't hypothetical. It was real and immediate. He grabbed his coat and rushed to the Miller home, where Laura and Tom were anxiously packing. Emma sat quietly in the corner, her tiny figure pressed against Rex, who sat alert and tense. Riley knelt beside Emma. "Emma, do you see him?" The child's eyes widened. She pointed toward the backyard. He's coming. Rex knows he's bad." Riley followed her gaze. The backyard was empty, but the ground told a story. Fresh footprints had appeared overnight, a trail that led from the edge of the woods, across the yard and toward the highway. Someone had been there recently, tracking the family. Riley felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Gregory Hayes was only one piece of the puzzle. Someone else, someone more organized, had been watching, waiting, and planning, and they knew Emma had spoken in court. He called for backup. Within minutes, a team of officers arrived, scanning the perimeter, flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. Rex led the way, nose to the ground, tail stiff, ears alert. The dog paused frequently, sniffing the air, growling low, guiding Riley toward the edge of the woods. The trail led to an abandoned cabin, hidden deep among the trees. Windows were boarded up, the door hanging loosely on its hinges. Riley's pulse quickened. This was no casual hideout. It was a deliberate staging ground, a place for someone to observe and plan without being seen. Riley motioned for his team to stay back. He drew his weapon and approached slowly, Rex at his side, every sense on high alert. As he peered through a broken window, he saw evidence that confirmed his worst fears. Inside, boxes of surveillance photos, maps of the town, and detailed notes on the Miller family were scattered across a table. It was clear this wasn't just about Gregory Hayes. There was a network, a group of people watching the family for weeks, maybe months. And then a sound, a faint shuffle from the corner of the cabin. Riley's heart pounded. "Police!" he shouted, and the shadow moved. Someone tried to flee. Rex lunged, barking, pinning the figure against the wall. The man struggled, but the dog's strength was unmatched. Riley approached, handcuffs ready. The man was one of Gregory Hayes' known associates, someone connected to petty crimes in the area but also suspected of intimidation. Under questioning, he confessed to following the Millers, documenting their routines and trying to intimidate witnesses, including Emma. But he insisted he had only been watching, not harming anyone, an assertion Riley didn't believe for a second. Riley's mind raced. If Gregory Hayes had a network of accomplices, how many more were out there? How long had they been planning this? And most importantly, how had they stayed hidden until now? Back at the Miller home, Emma clutched Rex, trembling slightly but calm. Her small voice broke the tension. "Rex, he scared them. They ran." Riley nodded. "Yes, Emma, you and Rex kept everyone safe." He crouched to her level. "But we need to find the others before they get a chance to hurt anyone else." The investigation expanded overnight. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses and traffic cameras was scrutinized. Phone records and digital footprints were traced. Every lead, every connection was pursued relentlessly. What emerged was shocking. Gregory Hayes had been working with a group of 3 other men, all with criminal records, all with knowledge of the town and its families. They had targeted the Millers for reasons that remained unclear: intimidation, leverage, or some twisted sense of control. The town was on edge. Parents kept children inside. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the shadow group that had been operating in their midst, and social media buzzed with speculation. But the truth was being pieced together methodically, like a puzzle that finally began to take shape. Riley stayed at the Miller home that night, reviewing evidence and planning the next move. Emma slept fitfully, clutching her bunny with Rex curled protectively at her side. The detective's phone buzzed constantly: updates from the team, reports from surveillance, and confirmation that the accomplices were being tracked. Then came the breakthrough. Surveillance from a gas station a few miles out captured a figure, one of the accomplices, carrying items that matched descriptions from the Miller home: a backpack, tools, and notes. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the night of the abduction. Riley felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just evidence, it was proof. The network had been active, planning, watching, and preparing. But now, thanks to Emma's courage and Rex's instincts, they had a trail, a path that could lead to every member of the group. At dawn, the operation began. Officers fanned out across the area, coordinated by Riley. Rex led the way, nose to the ground, following the faint scent trail that twisted through woods, fields, and back roads. Each turn, each stop, brought them closer to the hidden members of the network. The tension was palpable. Everyone understood that these men were dangerous, unpredictable, and desperate. Finally, the team reached a remote warehouse on the outskirts of town. Inside, the accomplices had gathered, unaware of the approaching law enforcement. Through windows and doors, officers watched, noting positions, movements, and exits. Riley signaled. They were ready. Rex's low growl was the signal. The team moved in swiftly, surrounding the building. The accomplices had nowhere to flee. One by one, they were apprehended, caught with incriminating evidence: maps, surveillance photos, and tools. Each arrest confirmed what Riley had feared: the abduction of Emma had been part of a larger, orchestrated plan. Back at the Miller home, Laura and Tom held Emma tightly, tears streaming down their faces. "You're safe now," Laura whispered, "thanks to you and Rex." Emma hugged her bunny tightly, looking down at Rex, who wagged his tail faintly, tired but alert. "We did it," she said softly. "He can't hurt anyone now." Riley, watching the scene, felt a mixture of relief and unease. The immediate danger had been neutralized, but the network's intentions, their reach, and the potential for further threats remained a concern. The story was far from over. And as the town slowly absorbed the news, a 3-year-old and a dog had exposed a criminal network. The tension remained. Everyone knew the case had changed the community forever. Emma's bravery, Rex's instincts, and Riley's diligence had prevented a tragedy. But the shadows that had been lurking were now exposed, and the town understood. Evil had been present, and even when defeated, it left a mark that would not easily fade. Suspense hook for Part 6. Just when it seemed the network was dismantled, a shocking revelation would emerge. One that would show that Gregory Hayes and his accomplices were only the beginning, and that Emma and Rex were about to face an even more terrifying truth. The morning after the arrests, the Miller house felt like a fragile sanctuary. Sunlight streamed weakly through the curtains, casting long shadows across the living room, but the calm was deceptive. Emma sat on the couch, clutching her stuffed bunny, her tiny body trembling with exhaustion. Rex lay beside her, ears alert, tail twitching occasionally as if sensing the lingering unease in the house. Laura and Tom hovered nearby, tense, wary, and emotionally raw. Tears had streaked their faces the night before, relief and terror colliding in a whirlwind of emotion. They tried to speak, to comfort Emma, but the words felt hollow, inadequate in the face of what their daughter had endured. Riley, who had stayed late into the night coordinating the arrests and evidence collection, leaned against the doorframe, watching quietly. His face was tight with worry. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the aftershocks of fear, trauma, and uncertainty had only just begun. Emma stared at Rex, small hands clutching his leash tightly. Her eyes were wide, but there was a wariness in them, a caution that no 3-year-old should have to carry. "Rex, he's gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. Riley shook his head gently. "No, Emma, he's right here. He's not going anywhere." The child's fingers flexed around the leash, knuckles white. He was scary. The men, they came back. Laura's hand flew to her mouth. "Sweetheart, they're gone. They can't hurt you now." But even as she said the words, her own heart wasn't convinced. The image of strangers watching, planning, and lying in wait had left an indelible mark. Riley moved closer to Emma, crouching to her level. "Emma," he said gently, "do you remember how brave you were yesterday? You helped us find them. You and Rex made sure no one else could get hurt." Emma blinked, but her small lips pressed tightly together. I didn't want them to take anyone else. Rex, he helped me." Riley nodded. "I know, and you're safe now." But safety was a fragile concept. Riley had seen it in the eyes of victims before: the lingering fear, the sudden flinch at a noise, the way the smallest shadow could trigger panic. Emma's trauma was real, tangible, and dangerous if left unaddressed. Over the next few days, Dr. Marlene Hayes visited regularly, her approach gentle, patient, and methodical. She guided Emma through small exercises, drawing, storytelling, and play therapy. But every step forward was met with hesitation, as if Emma's mind was constantly scanning for danger. Every unexpected sound made her stiffen. Every unfamiliar face drew suspicion. And Rex remained a constant, silent guardian, alert and protective. Meanwhile, Riley coordinated with local authorities to ensure the network connected to Gregory Hayes was fully dismantled. Evidence was cataloged, accomplices interrogated, and the community informed. The town, once tranquil, now buzzed with anxiety, suspicion, and curiosity. Parents clutched their children a little tighter, neighbors whispered in hushed tones, and everyone kept one wary eye on the shadows. Despite the arrests, Riley felt a gnawing unease. There were unanswered questions. Why had the Millers been targeted? How long had the network been operating in the town? And most pressing of all, who else might have been involved, lurking unseen? That evening, Riley returned to the Miller home to check on Emma. She was in the living room, surrounded by drawings of stick figures, houses, and a small black dog in every picture. Each drawing seemed to represent her fear, her world, and the protection Rex offered. "You've been very brave, Emma," Riley said softly, sitting beside her. Emma nodded, but her eyes were fixed on the window. They watched us. They know. Rex, he knows." Riley's stomach tightened. She was right. Even with arrests made, the threat hadn't fully dissipated. The network had been clever, organized, and patient. There was no guarantee they wouldn't resurface, targeting Emma or other families. Laura approached, holding a warm cup of tea. "She's right," Riley admitted. "We've neutralized the immediate danger, but the past few days have changed everything. We have to be careful." Tom knelt beside Emma, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "We're not going anywhere." But Emma's eyes were haunted. What if they come back? Riley exhaled slowly. "Then we'll be ready. You and Rex are not alone. We'll protect you." Even as he spoke, Riley felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The child had survived a terrifying ordeal, but the emotional aftermath was still unfolding. The trauma wasn't just in the physical events. It was in the constant vigilance, the distrust, the fear of shadows, and the memory of being powerless in the face of danger. Over the next week, the Millers began adjusting to a new reality. Security systems were upgraded, neighborhood watch programs intensified, and Riley personally ensured regular patrols around the home. Emma, meanwhile, began speaking in small, deliberate bursts, often pointing out details only Rex seemed to notice. "Rex, he smells him," she'd say, and Riley would watch uneasy, knowing her words reflected instincts honed in a terrifying, real-life scenario. Yet despite the precautions, Riley noticed the subtle signs of trauma lingering in Emma. She flinched at sudden noises, hesitated before opening doors and frequently looked to Rex for reassurance. Her play was cautious, measured, and sometimes obsessive, always involving Rex. The German Shepherd had become her anchor, the living embodiment of safety, loyalty, and protection. One evening, Riley found Emma sitting on the porch steps, sketching with a crayon. The drawings were vivid, dark shapes lurking in the trees, a tiny girl holding a dog, shadows fleeing from a bright light. "What's this?" he asked gently. Emma looked up, small eyes serious. "Rex, he fights the bad, he chases them. I draw it so they know." Riley felt a pang in his chest. She had internalized the trauma and turned it into a story, a map, and a warning. The innocence of childhood had been overwritten by vigilance, fear, and survival instincts. That night, as the family settled for sleep, Riley reviewed the evidence one last time. The network had been dismantled, the immediate threat neutralized, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something remained, a loose thread, an unknown element waiting in the shadows. He glanced at Emma, peacefully asleep with Rex curled at her feet, and silently vowed he would not let anyone harm her again. But even as the town breathed a tentative sigh of relief, whispers persisted. Who else had been watching? How long had the network been operating? And had they truly been neutralized, or had the arrest of Gregory Hayes and his accomplices only forced them to disappear into the shadows, waiting for another opportunity? Riley knew the answer was uncertain. The psychological fallout had only just begun. Emma's bravery had saved lives, her testimony had exposed criminals, and Rex had been more than a dog. He had been an instinctual, unwavering protector. But the story wasn't over. The trauma, the fear, and the shadow of what had happened would linger, and perhaps the network's reach extended farther than anyone could imagine. Laura sat beside Riley in the quiet of the living room. "Do you think it's over?" she asked softly. Riley shook his head. "It's never truly over, not until we understand who else was involved and why they targeted the Millers. But for now, Emma is safe, and that's what matters most." Rex shifted slightly, nudging Emma's small hand with his nose, and she smiled faintly, the first true smile in days. It was fragile, tentative, but real, a reminder that even in the aftermath of terror, resilience could take root. But as Riley looked out the window toward the darkened woods beyond the Miller property, he felt the unease return. Somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes could still be watching. And tomorrow, the story would continue, revealing new threats, deeper mysteries, and the terrifying truth that Gregory Hayes and his network had only been the beginning. Suspense hook for Part 7. Just when the Millers began to feel safe, new intelligence would reveal that the network had accomplices still at large, and someone closer than they realized was preparing to strike again. The Miller household had settled into a fragile semblance of normalcy. The sun dipped behind the tree line, painting the backyard in orange and gold, but the golden hue did little to warm the tension still lingering in the house. Laura and Tom moved cautiously through their routines, each sound a door creak, a car on the street, even the hum of the refrigerator, making their hearts skip a beat. Emma sat on the living room floor, coloring carefully, Rex at her side. The German Shepherd was vigilant, eyes scanning windows, ears twitching at the slightest noise. Riley remained nearby, reviewing reports and coordinating with law enforcement. While Gregory Hayes and his immediate network were behind bars, Riley's gut warned him the danger wasn't truly gone. The first sign of trouble came subtly. Riley's phone buzzed with an encrypted alert. One of the accomplices under surveillance had made contact, digital footprints suggesting someone had been watching the Millers' home, tracking movements, even communicating with unknown parties. Riley's pulse quickened. "They're not done," he muttered, showing Laura and Tom the alert. Their faces paled. Emma, watching him intently, whispered, "Rex, he smells them." Riley crouched beside her, a chill running down his spine. "Who, Emma, can you show me?" The child's tiny hand trembled as she pointed toward the edge of the woods beyond the backyard. "There, he hides there, he waits," Rex knows. Laura gasped, Tom's jaw tightened. Riley's eyes met theirs. We need to take precautions now. Within the hour, the perimeter around the Miller home had been fortified. Cameras, motion sensors, and floodlights were installed, while uniformed officers discreetly patrolled nearby. But Riley knew technology alone couldn't neutralize instinct. The danger wasn't just physical. It was psychological, creeping, silent, and patient. Late that night, Emma awoke from a fitful sleep, shivering, whispering, Rex, he's here. He waits. Riley followed her to the living room. Rex stood at the window, ears forward, growling low, tail stiff. Through the darkness, Riley saw a shadow moving just beyond the tree line, crouched, watching. Heart hammering, he signaled officers nearby, but the figure melted back into the trees before anyone could approach. Someone's still out there, Riley muttered, and they know we're aware of them. Over the next few days, the Millers were on high alert. Emma's cautious behavior intensified. She refused to go near doors or windows alone, insisted on Rex's presence at all times, and occasionally froze mid-step, whispering, "He's close." Riley's team worked around the clock, reviewing security footage, digital communications, and travel logs of the remaining accomplices. Patterns emerged. The network was coordinated, patient, and adaptable. It wasn't just Gregory Hayes and his immediate circle. There were others operating in the shadows, willing to bide their time until the family let their guard down. One evening, while reviewing footage from a newly installed motion sensor near the back gate, Riley froze. A figure moved across the frame, small, cautious, carrying what appeared to be a package. The timestamp showed it had occurred earlier that day, unnoticed by the Millers. Laura gasped, "Someone came here." Riley nodded grimly. "They're testing us, seeing how we react. They're bold and they're close." Emma, crouched beside Rex, whispered, "He touched the gate. Rex smells him. He's coming back." The next day, Riley coordinated a controlled stakeout. Officers hid in unmarked vehicles around the property, cameras transmitted live feeds, and Rex was placed on high alert. Hours passed, the tension stretching every second into an eternity. Then, just before dusk, the shadow appeared again, a man attempting to climb over the fence. Riley moved quickly. "Freeze, police." The man froze, then bolted into the woods. Rex barked, charging after him while officers pursued on foot. The chase was tense, shadows of trees whipping past, branches snapping underfoot. Within minutes, the man was apprehended, one of the accomplices who had been monitoring the Millers' home for weeks. Under questioning, he revealed chilling details. Gregory Hayes' network had been larger than anyone realized. They had been planning additional surveillance, intimidation, and even potential abductions. Emma's testimony had disrupted their timeline, forcing them into retreat, but the plan had been meticulous and ruthless. Riley returned home late that night, exhausted but vigilant. Emma and Rex sat quietly by the window, watching the darkness. "He's gone," she whispered. "For now," Riley replied, but deep down he knew the word gone was temporary. The network had patience, and the shadows could return when least expected. Over the following week, Riley implemented tighter security and surveillance. Officers were stationed in shifts, cameras monitored constantly, and neighborhood watch members briefed. Yet Emma's fear persisted, subtle but sharp. She flinched at sudden sounds, refused to step into certain rooms without Rex, and sometimes whispered to the dog, "He's near. Don't let him get me." One night, as a storm raged outside, the tension snapped. A loud crash echoed from the backyard. A tree branch had been knocked down, but Emma screamed, convinced it was someone trying to enter. Rex growled, fur bristling, and Emma clung to him, trembling. Riley raced to the window, flashlight in hand. The backyard was empty. But Riley didn't relax. He knew the psychological warfare had begun. The network's goal wasn't just physical harm, it was terror, control, and fear. Emma's instincts were correct. Someone had been close, watching, and waiting for the right moment. That night, Riley sat beside Emma, gently holding her hand. "You've been incredibly brave," he said softly. "But we're going to catch them, I promise. No one is going to hurt you." Emma looked at Rex, then back at Riley. "He knows, he's smart. Don't let him come back." Riley nodded. "We won't." But even as he spoke, the weight of uncertainty pressed down. The network had been patient for weeks, maybe months. They had adapted, retreated, and now they were planning their next move. Emma's bravery and Rex's instincts had kept them safe so far, but Riley knew that one misstep could put everything at risk. Outside, the storm raged on, wind howling through the trees, shadows dancing in the darkness. Riley glanced at the security monitors. All clear. Yet in the silence, he couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes in the shadows hadn't disappeared. They had only grown more cunning, more dangerous. Emma slept fitfully, clutching her bunny with Rex curled tightly at her feet. Riley sat in the dim light of the living room, scanning the monitors, phone ready, senses on edge. The hidden threat was still out there, waiting, patient and relentless. And tomorrow, he knew, the next move would come. Suspense hook for Part 8. The remaining accomplices were about to make a daring attempt, and Emma, with Rex by her side, would be forced to confront the danger directly, revealing the final twist in this terrifying real-life drama. The night air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and the distant hum of the town that had long since gone quiet. Inside the Miller home, tension clung to every corner. Emma sat on the living room floor, clutching her stuffed bunny with tiny fingers, while Rex lay at her side, ears twitching, tail stiff, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the windows. Riley had spent the entire day coordinating a perimeter sweep, ensuring officers were stationed strategically, and monitoring all possible escape routes. Despite the network's previous setbacks, he knew the accomplices were clever, patient, and dangerous. They wouldn't give up easily, and tonight, the culmination of their long, sinister plan was about to unfold. "Emma," Riley whispered, crouching beside her, "I need you to stay calm. Rex and I are right here. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, dark eyes wide but steady. "Rex, he'll protect me, right?" Riley placed a hand on Rex's head. "He'll do more than protect. He'll fight if he has to, and so will we." Hours passed. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling windows, rain lashing against the roof. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow stretching across the room set Emma on edge. She whispered, "He's coming. I can smell him. Rex knows." Riley's jaw tightened. He trusted Emma's instincts implicitly. After all, her testimony had exposed Gregory Hayes and his network. And Rex's trained instincts had proven time and again that danger was near when he reacted. Suddenly, a faint noise outside, the unmistakable sound of someone climbing the back fence. Riley signaled officers quietly, readying himself for the confrontation. The figure slipped silently into the backyard, moving with purpose. Rex's low growl rumbled through the room, a warning that cut through the storm like thunder. Riley whispered to Emma, "Stay close, follow Rex's lead." The intruder approached the back door, tool in hand, intending to break in. But Rex was already ahead, ears forward, fur bristling, teeth bared in a growl that sent the man freezing mid-step. Emma clung to her bunny, eyes wide but silent, trusting the dog entirely. Riley moved swiftly, flanking the man from the side, flashlight trained on his face. "Police, step away." The intruder bolted, racing across the yard, but Rex lunged, catching him mid-stride, teeth snapping near his shoulder. The man stumbled, falling hard against the grass, and officers moved in, restraining him with handcuffs. The storm's fury seemed to mirror the tension, lightning flashing across the sky as the final confrontation unfolded. Riley approached cautiously. The man's eyes were wide with fear, not just of capture, but of the child and the dog who had thwarted him. "You're done," Riley said firmly. "No one is going to hurt this family again." Emma, standing cautiously behind Rex, whispered, "He's bad. He won't hurt anyone now." Her voice was small but resolute, carrying the weight of every terrifying moment she had endured. The man struggled, but the officers held him firmly. He hissed, spat out threats, but there was no escaping the truth. The network that had terrorized the Millers for weeks, the accomplices who had stalked them, was finally dismantled. In the following hours, law enforcement processed the arrest. The man, identified as the last active accomplice, had been planning to retaliate, to intimidate, and perhaps even abduct Emma. But thanks to her courage and Rex's instincts, that plan had failed. Riley finally returned to the living room, exhausted but relieved. Emma ran into his arms, clutching her bunny, leaning against Rex. "We did it," she whispered, small but triumphant. "Yes, we did," Riley said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were incredibly brave, Emma. You helped stop them." Laura and Tom joined them, embracing their daughter tightly. Tears streaked their faces, a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering fear. "You saved us all," Laura whispered. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Tom's voice broke. "I'm so proud of you, baby, so proud." Rex nudged Emma gently with his nose, tail wagging slightly. The dog had been more than a protector. He had been a constant anchor in the chaos, a silent partner in survival. Emma hugged him tightly, small hands pressing into his fur. Riley surveyed the scene, heart pounding. The storm outside was beginning to abate, the first hints of dawn brushing the horizon with soft pink and gold. The nightmare was over, the threat neutralized, at least for now. But even in the calm, Riley knew the psychological scars would take time to heal. Emma's courage had saved lives, exposed criminals, and dismantled a network of terror, but the emotional aftermath would require care, patience, and vigilance. The town slowly absorbed the news. Social media buzzed with awe and admiration. A 3-year-old girl, a German shepherd, and a detective had outwitted a dangerous criminal network. The story spread like wildfire, inspiring communities, drawing national attention, and highlighting the extraordinary bravery of a child who refused to be silenced. In the weeks that followed, Emma's life began to stabilize. Therapy sessions continued, focusing on trauma recovery, coping skills, and rebuilding a sense of safety. Security measures remained in place, officers keeping watch, but the Millers were no longer prisoners in their own home. The knowledge that Emma and Rex had faced danger together and won created a bond stronger than fear, one of trust, courage, and resilience. Riley visited frequently, checking on progress and ensuring every threat had been eliminated. He observed Emma interacting with Rex, small smiles appearing more frequently, laughter returning in cautious bursts. The girl who had been terrified, who had whispered to a dog to fight the danger, was learning to trust the world again. One afternoon, as Emma played in the yard with Rex, Riley and Laura watched from the porch. Emma tossed a ball, laughing as Rex bounded to retrieve it. For the first time in weeks, the tension in Laura's shoulders relaxed. Tom leaned against the railing, smiling faintly, eyes reflecting pride and relief. Riley felt a sense of closure, though he knew vigilance would always be part of their lives. The network had been dismantled, the threat eliminated, and the town had rallied around the family. The Millers, particularly Emma, had endured unimaginable fear and emerged stronger, more resilient, and profoundly courageous. Emma paused mid-run, turning to Rex with a determined look. "We're safe now," she said softly. Rex barked in agreement, tail wagging. Riley smiled, a rare warmth breaking through the exhaustion. "Yes, Emma, you and Rex are safe. You did everything right." Laura embraced her daughter tightly. "We love you, baby, so much." Tom knelt, hugging Emma from the front. "You're our hero, and Rex, you're our hero too." Rex nudged Emma's cheek gently, his dark eyes reflecting loyalty, courage, and the unspoken bond that had carried them through the darkest days. The storm had passed, literally and figuratively. Shadows had been driven back. Danger had been confronted head-on and defeated. Emma, A child who had faced terror no one her age should ever encounter, had become a symbol of resilience, bravery, and the extraordinary connection between humans and their canine guardians. Riley stood back, watching the family, the sun rising higher in the sky, and felt a rare sense of peace. The network's reach had been broken, the immediate danger had ended, and Emma, with Rex by her side, had emerged not only unscathed but triumphant. For now, the world was safe. For now, the Millers could breathe, laugh, and live without fear. And for now, the story of a 3-year-old girl, a police dog, and the courage that changed everything would be remembered, a testament to resilience, love, and the extraordinary bond between a child and her protector. Final note: the town would never forget how Emma, with the unwavering instincts of Rex and the dedication of Detective Riley, had faced darkness head-on and emerged victorious, proving that courage can come in the smallest, most unexpected forms.